the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Before we start with the main topic of our episode, we'll be starting with this report where President Abdel Fattah Sisi appreciates the constructive cooperation between Egypt and the IMF implementing the economic reform. President Sisi appreciated the constructive and fruitful cooperation between Egypt and the IMF to continue implementing an all-out comprehensive economic and reform program. More details.
President Abdel Fattah Sisi appreciated the constructive and fruitful cooperation between Egypt and the International Monetary Fund to continue implementing an all-out comprehensive economic reform program. Presidential spokesman Ahmed Fahmy said Sisi's remarks were made during his meeting with Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund on the sidelines of the World Government Summit 2023. The spokesman said Sisi asserted that Egypt was keen on pursuing its reforms to enhance the relevant structural reforms pertaining to its financial and monetary policies, maximizing the role of the private sector in order to help provide a positive climate for all investors and international stock market about the Egyptian economy and enhance available investment opportunities. The meeting also took up spheres of cooperation between Egypt and the IMF, especially in light of their sustained cooperation in implementing the Egyptian economic reforms. The managing director of the IMF, for her part, praised the performance of the Egyptian economy and its steadiness to absorb the negative impact of the coronavirus pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine crisis, in addition to the state's embracing of a development vision to improve the country's economic indicators. She also noted that the IMF is seeking to pursue its outstanding cooperation with Egypt to support its economic reforms.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is in Addis Ababa to participate in the 42nd edition of the Executive Council of the African Union, which starts on Wednesday at the level of the foreign ministers.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry headed to Addis Ababa to participate in the 42nd edition of the Executive Council of the African Union, or the AU, which starts on Wednesday at the level of the foreign ministers. Ambassador Ahmed Abu Zaid, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said that the Executive Council of the AU will discuss in its new session a number of important issues that are a priority on the African scene, the most important of which is the report on the annual activities of the AU and its organs. The Council will also discuss the acceleration of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the humanitarian and social situation on the continent, the reports of the ministerial committees of the Executive Council, the issues of food, economic integration, and continental integration, in addition to the progress made in the operationalization of the African Drug Agency and many other issues. Minister Shoukry is scheduled to meet on sidelines of his participation with a number of African foreign ministers to discuss aspects of cooperation and ways to enhance bilateral relations and exchange views on the issues of the continent of common interest. He will also meet with a number of officials from outside the continent who are keen to be present on the sidelines of the African Summit. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson revealed that a number of guests will participate in delivering statements at the opening session of the Executive Council this year, such as Spanish Foreign Minister and UAE Minister of State for African Affairs and others. The 36th session of the African Union Summit is being held this year under the theme Accelerating the Operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and will begin its work on February 18th for 2 days.
To shed more light on that topic, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Soad Shalaby, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Shalaby, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
How do you see the participation of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry in the 42nd edition of the Executive Council of the African Union to discuss in its new session number of important issues that are considered to be a priority to the African scene? Can you shed more light about the main topics that would be discussed during that summit?
Yes, of course. Egypt has always been present in the Executive Council. That is the first meeting that is held this year in order to that precedes the summit, which will take place on the 18th and 19th of February. So this is a very important meeting because it will have the change of the succession of the chairmanship of the AU Commission. It will go to the Comore Islands. So this is it was in Senegal last year. This year it's going to be the Comore. So the handover will take place in this meeting, the summit, and also the ministers of foreign affairs of all the countries in Africa are meeting today and tomorrow in order to present to the heads of state the agenda that will take place during the summit, which will include, of course, a lot of challenges that has been facing Africa during the past year, especially the civil wars that had taken place, the coup d'etats that took place in West Africa, Burkina Faso, and Chad, and other countries, and the situation in Mali, which is very difficult now, and the fighting in the northern Congo, and of course the situation in Libya. So there are many challenges in peacekeeping, and also in Ethiopia, in the Tigray region, where there has been facing conflict during the past year. So the ministers of foreign affairs are going to discuss the situation of insecurity in Africa. Peace and security, of course, are on the agenda, and of course the African Free Trade Agreement, which has been launched 2 years ago and has been ratified by many countries. So this is one of the main problems, or main, challenges that has to be discussed. So the Agenda 2063, which all the African countries are looking up to, how much are they succeeding in facing the economic and the developmental challenges during these years.
Yes. Ambassador Shalaby, also one of the issues to be discussed during the conference is the Africa Free Trade Agreement, as well as the food crisis and boosting economic integration and inclusion. How do you see these very important topics, which could be of a real change, of real positive, if implemented properly, outcome on the African continent?
Yes, of course, this agreement is very important, and it is positive because it gives a future, a hope for the future, because the African countries are representing only 3% of the trade, in the world trade. So this is not enough. That is why we have to promote the cross-border trade between them, and also to lay the infrastructure which will help them to increase the trade between themselves and between Africa and the world. So this will not happen except if there is a political will, and there is, of course, an investment in the sector of trade and commerce, and of course to change the national policies and to put like a target in order to trade with partners and with neighbors instead of trading with Europe or the Western countries. So the trade between the countries in Africa has to depend on opening the borders and of course abolishing the taxes between the countries, liberating the trade, and having and raising the standard of products so that it is possible that countries like, for instance, South Africa, Morocco, or Egypt can trade in between when they have the possibilities of airlines, cargo ships, or means and ways of transporting the goods and also the services that are very important in order to raise the standard of living, because all what we are doing what we are aiming to do is to create more jobs for the youth, because the African continent has more youth than elderly. That means that 30% of the population are young and they are looking for jobs. So in order to have a sustainable economy in every country and in the African continent in general, we have to provide jobs for these youth, for the young who have graduated and who have good education and who have good experience to get jobs in their country and in their continent itself.
Yes, indeed. Finally, Ambassador Shalaby, one of the topics to be discussed is the operation of the African Medicine Agency. What's your take on that?
Yes, of course, the medical agency is a very important, especially after Africa has suffered from the pandemic,
of course,
and now we are suffering from the food crisis. So there has to be independent medical agency for Africa to provide facilities for manufacturing of drugs, manufacturing of all kinds of vaccinations, and also to concentrate on the problems of health problems of Africans, and not just import from Europe or from the West what is produced, because of course they have natural resources that could help them in manufacturing the medications. And Egypt, of course, is helping a lot in that field, because we have a very high standard of drug and vaccination production in Egypt, and we offer the know-how to many African countries. So Egypt will play a bigger role in the medical field.
Yes.
In this agency, it will be a good role for Egypt.
Indeed. Ambassador Soad Shalaby, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for your precious input. And moving on to South Africa, which declared a state of national disaster on Monday night, after floods caused by the heavy rains in recent days have already left 7 people dead and others missing, according to the Disaster Management Center in several provinces.
Disaster management centers in South Africa, the country declared a state of national disaster after floods caused by heavy rains in recent days have already left 7 people dead and others missing. At least 5 people died in KwaZulu-Natal, according to Nanula, spokesman of the Disaster Management Center of the coastal province. Among them is a newborn baby who died in the flooding of a house, according to a statement. Several people are missing after trying to cross a flooded river. 2 other people were killed in the neighboring northeastern province of Mpumalanga. In Limpopo, a province bordering Zimbabwe, damage was reported to a hospital. Roads and bridges were damaged and cars were washed away. The National Weather Center is predicting persistent and heavy rains ahead, with the risk of flooding due to the waterlogged soils and saturated rivers. South Africa experienced the worst flooding in its history last year, mainly affecting Durban, the country's third largest city and the major port of the continent. Heavy rains triggered impressive mudslides that swept away people, bridges, roads, and entire buildings. The storms killed more than 400 people and affected more than 85,000.
Well, with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of our program Africa Today, where we have been discussing Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry's participation in the 42nd round of the African Union Executive Council, which kicked off today in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. At the foreign minister levels, the two-day conference will discuss a number of issues and files of common concern, including the activation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, the food crisis, and boosting economic integration and inclusion, as well as operating the African Medicine Agency. I'm Rabia signing off.